Hey guys, Peter Shankman. Welcome to another episode of 20 Minutes in Lockdown. We are waiting on Andrew Wade from Case Specific Nutrition, who is going to come, hopefully, and give us tons of advice on how to not gain 600 pounds while sitting in lockdown and waiting for it to end. I can tell you that I have been eating a lot more than normal in the past 24 hours because it was about 24 hours ago that I found out that my Ironman that I've been training for at least the last 2.5, 3 months has been postponed from October to February. And that was depressing. And looks like Andrew's here. So let's add him to the stream. Welcome, Andrew. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Well, doing the best I can. I'm sure you heard about Kona. So that's
yeah. I just heard, actually. Very sad. Yeah, that's not.
Hey, it's just more time that you get to deal with my bullshit.
I was gonna say it's more time that you and I get. That's not a bad thing. I've had a couple of ultra guys that I'm doing that with, where it's like, hey, you know what? Let's set it up so that we can split preparation and performance.
Yeah. So I'm taking this weekend. I'm not listening to any of your advice. I'm eating everything in sight, and I'll start again on Monday.
Sounds good. Okay, you get a vacation.
But good to have you here. I'm loving the quarantine beard. That's a nice touch.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about how unkempt it would look on this video. On Zoom, it's okay with my clients, but
yeah, I did the quarantine hair starting to fade already. It turned into seafoam green. But anyway, good to have you here. Tell us a little about yourself. You're a nutritionist. You coach a lot of athletes and things like that. And what we want to talk about today is how to come out of this lockdown and not have gained 40 pounds. So I think that you're a perfect person for that. For those who are just finding out, and to people who are watching us on repeat and on the stream after this, Andrew's been helping me for about 2 months now as I train for Ironman Kona, which is now Ironman Kona in February. And he's been doing a great job. He's been giving me very basic, logical things to do that don't leave me deprived and kind of help. And the weight's coming off. So tell us a little about yourself, Andrew.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm a sports dietitian by training, so I'm a CSSD, Certified Specialist in Sports Dietetics. I run a private practice in Pittsburgh, PA. We have a group of now 20 different dietitians across the board. But as an individual, I work with athletes quite a bit. I work with lifestyle and sort of weight management and chronic disease prevention. So, with people trying to get moving and get their bodies back into that state of human performance, that's kind of my role.
Very cool. Tell us about what you've been seeing in terms of people and their weight and their output in terms of this pandemic and what we're going through here.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've had a couple of conversations about this. And obviously, with clients, I've been doing it a bunch, but we forget that our bodies are very instinctive. Our hunger cues are very instinctive, and one of the things that really triggers our body is uncertainty, right? We are planned creatures. We like to know what we're doing, where we're going. We avoid fear. We avoid unpredictability. So when we have uncertain times like this, where we don't know what the next month, 2 months, 3 months holds, that really does trigger that sort of intrinsic limbic brain, right? That subconscious brain that tells you need to prepare. And in needing to prepare, one of the things it says is eat food. You need to prepare for whatever journey is to come. So a lot of us are feeling that, right, in the form of snacking. Your body's constantly looking for food. It's looking for comfort, a lot of people say, which comfort foods tend to be those more calorically dense foods. So your body's not really seeking comfort as much as it's seeking calorie in preparation for the journey ahead.
That was my question. Is it doing that? Are our brains telling us to do that so we have, because according to what our brains think, we're going to walk across the tundra and have to prepare?
Yeah, and we are a nomadic species, and now instead of roaming the plains, we get on planes, right? But in that nomadic sense, our body, whenever we needed to move or we needed to migrate or we had uncertainty about our current surroundings, we would need to prepare physically. We need to have enough energy to get by, so we would eat more, build up fat stores, build up carb stores, and allow ourselves to have that excess energy, so that if we had food insecurity during the journey, we'd be in a good place. And obviously, we live in a modern society where food insecurity is not nearly as prevalent for most of us. And so we end up just eating and eating and eating. And then we don't ever do the long walk or the nomadic migration. We just stay at our house and we migrate from our couch to our bedroom potentially, and maybe to a dining room / office / school.
This is my kitchen. This is my fridge. It's literally, I can touch my fridge from where I am right now, and it's horrible.
Yeah, and I loved you had that sign a couple months back where you opened the fridge and it said you're bored, and then you close the door. And it's so true. But then in addition to sort of that that limbic tendency, right, that brain, that part of the brain that's telling us to prepare, is also the loss of a lot of our outlets. We also have to remember that we do enjoy food. Food is social, it's cultural, it's a lot of things. Obviously where you live, it's, pizza and all of those great things. There's more restaurants than you could ever eat in your lifetime. And something to remember is most of that has been taken from us, right? Our social outlets, the way we spend time with people, what we do in our free time, the things that give you that exhale at the end of a long day, a lot of it has been temporarily suspended till further notice. And so food is one of the things that we really have left that is that enjoyment, that is that outlet that we can actually rely on. And so it's gone from being, one of 10, that you might rotate in terms of, emotional outlets, to being kind of one of one or one of two, depending on what you have. I've been telling people that if you don't have a hobby, you need a hobby, because people with hobbies are the ones that aren't snacking. Right. If I have people that like knit or crochet or, play guitar or like to juggle or whatever it is, they're doing something. Video gamers tend to be snacking less. If you have something that you do in your downtime, but for those of us that go a million miles an hour and kind of do the work thing, and I always say business is it's my career and it's my hobby. When that slows down, you have this empty time. You don't have downtime. You have this empty time that doesn't have a purpose, and you seek to fill it with enjoyment. And what's the fastest way to enjoy?
I mean, I was talking to my therapist about this, and that's actually one of the things, considering that I go to 1,000 miles an hour every single day, and I'm on stage in Tokyo, and the next day I'm on stage in Sao Paulo, and the next day I'm on stage. The fact that I'm not sitting here with needles coming out of my arm is a fucking miracle in itself, right?
Yeah,
you go from 1,000 miles an hour to zero, and it's like, holy shit! If this is where we are right now, what's next? And you make a good point about hobbies. I know when I'm trying to implement more hobbies than just working out. I've gotten into Just Dance 2020. It's this fun video game where right, and my daughter and I love it, so we compete. And a half an hour of that is a good 300 or 400 calorie burn, but it's a lot harder than it used to be. And it's a lot harder for me. A lot of us are creatures of habit, creatures of routine, right? Our routine starts at 5 a.m. We work out, right? And then we do this and this and this and this, and we plan the times to eat. And the times we're not planning to eat, we don't eat. Exactly. Right. And I mean, I worked out with my trainer at 8 a.m. this morning. That's like that's like after lunch for me already.
I was going to say that's like you're after second breakfast at that point, right?
So it's just a crazy time. Crystal has an interesting question. Andrew, does laughter and the resulting decrease in anxiety help us eat less?
And the answer is yes. And that's kind of what I was hinting at with the hobbies is, so we have the part of our brain that's saying, hey, we need to eat something because we need to prepare. But the part of our brain that's saying, eat something as an outlet, as something fun, that is what we call dopamine fatigue. Dopamine's the part of our brain that's our pleasure center, right? And it's since cocaine's frowned upon and smoking is out, right? Those are the two big dopamine spikes that we know about. Sugar.
We can't skydive.
Yeah, I mean, right. A lot of our adrenaline and our dopamine seeking. So the thing that we need, right? Dopamine is what gives us that pleasure. It gives us happiness. And when we laugh, which was her question, laughter spikes dopamine immediately. And so, like I said, in absence of having some sort of drug addiction or being a smoker, sugar is one of the most readily available things, but it has negative consequences. It obviously affects how we feel in a lot of ways on the back end. It has that dopamine crash on the back end. And so laughter is one of the best things you can do. I tell my clients all the time, if you need a 3 to 5 minute break in the middle of the day, you need to find something that makes you laugh. And so whether it's texting or calling a friend that you like to laugh with, whether it's hopping on YouTube and going on to one of the, there's like I think it's called like Drive Art Comedy. They do like 3-minute sketches of comedians from around the world. It's like instant guaranteed laughter. Laughter is one of the best ones. The only other one is personal accomplishment, which that's one that obviously a lot of people feel they've been stripped of in a lot of ways. But that's why the hobbies work, is what does a video game do? It makes you feel accomplished. What does completing a giant puzzle do? Feeling of accomplishment. Anything that spikes our dopamine, laughter and personal accomplishment can work. If you're looking beyond the laughter at that personal accomplishment, you can find little things that do that. I always say start with a bucket list item. So for example, say you've always wanted to go to Germany and realizing that travel right now is a big question mark. That might not happen for a while, but you've wanted to brush up on your German. Well, there's the mobile app, for example, Duolingo, which is out of my hometown, out of Carnegie Mellon. But it's a gamified language app, and it's bright colors. It's like Candy Crush, but with language, and you can brush up on your German. If you spend 5 or 10 minutes doing that a day, you're going to feel some accomplishment, like you've done something for yourself, and you've also done something that's contributing to this trip that you're going to take one day that gives you that connection, right? It's a short-term accomplishment, long-term ambition, and all of a sudden you start to feel yourself getting excited. That's dopamine back at work.
What's the name of that site again? We'll link to it.
Duolingo.
Duolingo, of course. Okay.
Yeah, it's a mobile app, and what's cool is if you get proficient, you can put it on your LinkedIn, and then it's actually a resume ad. So it's
even a better fit, right?
Once again, a little bit of personal accomplishment.
What do you okay, so talk about what people should have in their fridge when they're stuck at home 23 hours a day, right? And the problem for me is, of course, I still have to get the stuff that my daughter likes and then try not to eat it. But what should people have in their fridge when they're stuck at home and they're going to the fridge a lot more?
So this is the time, if there was ever a time, to focus on making real meals that are delicious to you, right? This isn't the time that we fall into this category of healthy, where everyone says, oh, I just eat a protein and a vegetable, right? And then I'm starving an hour later, so then I eat all the cheese puffs. This is the time when I would actually rather see a real meal. So I like to give the example because everyone gets surprised. It's like if you made a homemade mac and cheese that you sauteed spinach and broccoli and chicken and then stirred it into, right? That's going to be an example of a meal that feels comforting. It digests slowly. It really energizes you, but it's going to lead to less snacking. And so I'll say 2 things about what you want to keep in your pantries. One, you want to keep things in your pantries that are assigned to some general meal, right? Ideally, you have a general idea of how many times you eat per day, not, I just eat, right? And so what happens is a lot of times we go to the grocery store, we buy our fruits, we buy our vegetables. We were like, oh, I'm going to make that recipe this week. So we buy that meat and that side and whatever. And then there's the part of the grocery store where we just like put things in for just in case. Like, I have no idea when I'm going to eat these things, but they're going to be available. And then we act confused when we eat them randomly. And so what my wife and I do, we are dietitians. Do we not eat chips? No, we do. We enjoy chips. But chips are a lunch item. So what I've been doing lately is I've been including chips as a side dish as a part of my lunch. And because I know they're a part of my lunch and I know they're a part of her lunch, if I'm going to go at 9 o'clock and be tempted to eat them, I have to remember, oh, wait, they already have a meal, right? They're meant for something. They're no different than the ingredients you bought for that dinner recipe, right? So it really helps to have a plan, to have a general idea of what your meals are going to look like before you go to the grocery store. And then take the foods that you might want to snack on, you might want to treat yourself to, that might give you that little emotional boost. And instead of buying them just to dump them into your abyss of question mark, buy them as a part of a meal. That'd be my biggest advice.
So you're changing the concept of what the food is. It's no longer just random food sitting in your apartment. It's food that's designed for something. And if you take that out of place, then it won't work. Yeah.
Yep. And so it's psychology. And so instead of this, how tired is the game? Eat this, not that, right? Like, shouldn't have this, shouldn't have this. I don't want to be that boring dietitian that tells you the list of foods that are not as good for you. That's old news. We know that they aren't great, but why aren't they? Well, typically they're not very filling, and typically we eat them by themselves. And you and I have talked about lonely foods in the past, right? Foods that if you eat them alone, you eat too much of them, so you need to give them friends. It's the same concept here. Take those types of foods, those foods we criminalize, and then pair them with and make them a part of something so that you can actually get a fullness cue. You actually get satisfied, and then you move on.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I remember you mentioned something to me about how the foods that, eating a whole bunch of chips by themselves would be terrible, but pair it with broccoli or something in your meal, and you made it was how what the hell did you say? I wrote it down. It stops the spike of the, so if you eat something sugary, pair it with something else and it stops the spike. And now you explain it from Mr. Science.
Yeah. So it basically, it's almost like you're creating a time release effect, right? So sugar, when you eat it by itself, so say you and I just sit down and we just go handful for handful on a thing of Swedish fish, right? That sugar is in your bloodstream in 5 minutes, and that leads to a massive dopamine spike. And just like if you did a line of cocaine, right? Dopamine goes to 10, and then 9 feels like crap, 8 feels like crap, 7 feels like crap. So you do it again and again and again. Well, if we took a full meal. Say we had chicken broccoli stir fry with soy sauce and peppers, right? So we did some sort of bowl item like that. And then you ate that meal. And then for dessert, you had a handful of Swedish fish. Well, all of that food is going to be stuck in the stomach. The stomach closes because it has to digest protein. It has to start to break down things with acid. So then those Swedish fish don't get to your bloodstream in 5 minutes. You don't get this massive blood sugar spike. Those Swedish fish get thrown into a giant melting pot of fiber, fat, protein, and you get a slow release of it over 3 hours. So instead of a blood sugar that looks like this, it kind of is a time release, right? And that means less of a dopamine spike, which means less of a dopamine crash, which means you're not right back to the pantry in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Vicky Smith has an interesting question I'm going to post. She asks about she's consistent. The kids cooking dinner once a week. She's eating way too well. How can we do this with lower calories and cost? She's enjoying Peruvian, but they have no concept of how to do a meal on a budget.
Ooh, that's a really good one. First off, I want to congratulate on the brilliance. Having the kids cook a dinner once a week, that's a really fun one. It's a good way to get the kids involved and engaged. Doing food on a budget is usually, it's a very boring upfront response, but it usually starts with trying to identify what your main costs are. And so what I would say is, if you have the ability to look back on what last week's grocery budget looked like and what, if you ordered meals out, what that tallied, you'll quickly be able to see on a receipt the things that cost a ton. But generally speaking, it's the type of meat you're buying. And what's counterintuitive actually is that leaner meats oftentimes are actually middle cost, as opposed to a lot of people think that they're higher cost. Your most expensive meats are always your things like your filet mignon and your salmon, which those would be examples of foods that actually aren't necessarily low in fat. Those are foods that are high quality fats and high quality protein. But things like chicken breast and pork tenderloin, and even things like tofu, those are all more price neutral options. If you're really looking to reduce the budget, you can go canned tuna, canned chicken if there's really some nickel and diming needing to go on. Meat tends to be a really, really expensive piece, which is part of the reason why that whole plant-based meal becomes a useful option if you do a plant-based meal once a week. If you buy, for example, Banza pasta, it's a chickpea pasta, and a cup of it has 25 grams of protein and 38 grams of carbs, 17 grams of fiber, all to say it has the protein and the carb instead of a cup of normal pasta, which is just the carb for the most part. You don't need to buy the chicken. So you've paid for the protein and the carb in one. So having a plant-based meal like that using a chickpea pasta or lentils can reduce costs because protein tends to be expensive. Shopping those middle of the road proteins like chicken and pork tenderloin, which are both lean options. And then from there, it really comes back to produce as sort of one of the next more expensive items. But produce is based on season, right? So it's always shopping seasonality. If you live in Pittsburgh like I do, or New York like you do, blueberries aren't in season. And so you're going to pay a premium for them. And so finding the more local things, the pears, the apples, the clementines actually this time of year are easier to ship than blueberries are. You can find the fruits that are a little more affordable. And then from there, the last thing I'd say is that first tip I gave, where instead of that grocery store push where you're just dumping food in, I bet as a family with kids, you have a grocery budget that is allocated as discretionary that you don't even realize. It's all the random stuff that you buy for the kids, but we both know that you're eating it too, as kind of a general rule of thumb. If you look at the random items, the things that you just kind of stuff in the pantries, the snack foods, all that, and instead of having them just there for random, you say, oh, well, Tommy needs goldfish before he does his virtual guitar lesson, then buy the goldfish. But if you're buying 3 bags of tortilla chips just because, that's $10 that doesn't seem significant, but is also literally getting thrown away on a whim. So just a couple of ways to sort of tighten that budget, be more in tune with what you're buying.
Vicky replies, thank you for that. And she mentioned that her husband's a butcher. Well, Vicky, what the hell? Hook us up. Where you been?
I'm gonna say,
you don't post something like that without a package being put in the mail as you say it. Come on, get it
we
together.
need our butcher box.
Good God. Courtney has a question. She says, my meals are pretty balanced, but the boredom snacking in between conference calls is killing me. Any ideas for distractions or ways to keep the snacking dragon at bay?
I love that. Oh, that's so great. So I wish I wasn't in this office. My kitchen's getting remodeled right now, so I'm in the office that's 5 minutes from my house. But my home office would be such a good show and tell because I close the door. There's no snacks in there. But on the floor, There's the dog's leashes and my tennis shoes, which sets it up so I can get the dogs and walk right out. I have a massager, which I use, and a foam roller that I use to massage my low back or foam roll between sessions. I have a putting green because I'm starting to golf, and that's a hobby of mine that I'll putt some golf balls. It's all to say it's little distractions like that. A way to think about it is if you're seeking a snack after a meeting, what you're replacing is if you were in person after a meeting, you'd be making idle chit chat with a coworker that you were friendly with. And so all of a sudden you're looking for that like slight mental break. So you need to give yourself a mental break. Food is not the only mental break. There's lots of things we can do, simple little distractions. All I can say is that a back massage is something that I don't think anybody would argue against.
Good point. Last question we'll take from Thomas. He goes, how to handle guilt. The more guilty I feel, the more junk I eat, and the more allowed to junk, the more I feel less control. You got to break that cycle. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I spend a lot of time working with people on that. That guilt cycle is definitely a tricky one. And like he observed, right, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. The key is to remember, I guess, is to first ask the question, what are we feeling guilty for, right? Those foods, those junk foods, they get criminalized not because they are one portion of them is bad for us, right? They get criminalized because they're not filling and we have a tendency to overeat them and they don't fill us. And so the first thing I would say is what I said before, sweeping up your snacks or your junk food and working to try and include them in something or with something so that you can prove to yourself, oh, I can eat these in moderation. That initial step, that's going to set you up to be able to have a little bit more confidence in those, and also slowly but surely remove the unhealthy label off of them and realize that they're not unhealthy foods. They're just lonely foods. And when I eat them alone, I overeat and overeat and overeat. So we've got to break the cycle by thinking differently about the food itself, because if you realize that it's not actually bad, it's just not eaten properly, that becomes more than half the battle.
That's my favorite. I remember the comedian who said, I don't stop eating when I'm full. I stop eating when I hate myself.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that. Yeah. Very cool. How can people find you? How can they get more from you, Andrew?
I am most easy to find on social media. My company, Case Specific Nutrition, we are at Case Specific Nutrition. My team, we're all posting videos every week and all sorts of good stuff. And then my personal Instagram is probably the one I keep most attention to. It's Pittsburgh Dietitian. So Pittsburgh Dietitian instead of dietitian, GUY. And then casespecificnutrition.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to answer questions.
Very cool. Andrew Wade, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you're doing for me as well. You're making a big difference and you don't even know it. So thank you. Guys, we'll be back. The website is 20 Minutes in Lockdown, 20 Minutes in Lockdown. We have a list of all the lives we've done with everyone from mental health to internet to advertising to marketing, everything on the board. And we're doing a ton more, usually 2 to 3 a week. We got some amazing people coming up. So make sure you check it out. 20minutes-to-lockdown.com. And we'll see you soon. Have a great weekend and stay safe. Thank you again, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me.